There is the Society of Hospital Medicine, and they are a national organization as far as I know. And I just want to throw that out there. Maybe somehow we want to be involved with them. I don't know if we want to be a separate section within this, Society of Hospital Medicine, but it's something I think we should think about.
Sure.
I agree with the ACOG approach.
And that's one of the action items that we need to have at the end of this meeting. We need somebody to step up and say, okay, I'm going to be the one to contact the hospital, National Hospital Society of Hospital Medicine, and see where we fit there, gather information there, and then distribute that to all of us. That's an action item. We need to do that. Go ahead.
Anyone else ever belong to Society of Hospital Medicine? I belonged for 3 years, and there are not very many obstetrician members. So my point I'd like to make is I think we come together as a group, having been from the beginning of the special interest group for menopause from ACOG, and watching the evolvement from ASRM, ACOG, and NAMS, all three, that there's a multiplicity of ways to approach the problem. And right now it seems like you've got a core here that's somehow coming together in some mechanism is the answer.
I think that as we define who we are, as we try to figure out how we can fit into the larger issue of healthcare in America, and as we create research that supports the value that we do, whether it's in helping to define what our work actually is, or in how we improve the care of women. But those are three things that we can look at the end of this meeting: is who's interested in looking at research, who's interested in helping to define who we are, and who is interested in sort of long-term goal of how we fit into the changes that are happening in the nation. And so I think that could be one thing that we can walk away from this meeting tonight, is to figure out where each person in this room sort of stands in terms of those three big tasks. And the other thing is that we should make use of the ACOG system, which breaks ACOG down into regions. We should have a presence in each region as well. I mean, if there are OB hospitalists in region 2, 3, 4, then there ought to be subgroups that are represented at their annual meetings as well. In other words, we want to fan out and make sure that we are a presence everywhere that ACOG is a presence, if we want to sort of cast our lot with ACOG.
One of the things I want to know is, what else do people want as far as support services from an organization, or what are your needs that maybe this organization can provide to you, and what's your biggest problem? Go ahead.
Some of the programs, I know there apparently are 93 hospitalist programs around the country, some number like that. That was on your website.
101 now. We just found
101, so you've got more. What about, think about maybe an annual conference where the OB/GYN hospitalists meet annually, somewhere, and we all come together to, would begin to get adhesion. I'm afraid about going into the different parts of ACOG, Region 9, Region 10, it kind of splits us up. I'd like to bring us together and some sort of annual conference. The other thought I had was benefits. Some of the OB hospitalists do have benefits. I've heard others who say they don't get benefits from their contract. Right. There's some states that can employ doctors directly. So obviously some states, California, you have to have, the hospital can't employ the physicians directly. They usually have a contract with Delphi. Delphi employs the physicians. So we have to keep in mind the model is somewhat different in different states. And then health insurance, I mentioned health insurance benefits.
What else?
Well, why don't you take, go ahead, John.
I think one of the pressing issues that I would look at to work with ACOG, in whichever form you're doing, is the idea of what are the criteria to become a boarded OB/GYN and come out of residency program. I see a great reluctance. Look around the room. We're not seeing that many young physicians. There's certainly an interest, yet there's fear of, if I do this, I'm going to not get boarded. If I do this, I'm not going to get my skills. How am I going to accommodate this? And that's going to require working, saying, look, this is necessary. We need hospitalists as part of the mix for the healthcare delivery system. So how do you create a system where you're not saying, I'll only hire people that are finished practicing or halfway through a practice and want to stop, as opposed to people coming out of training. How do we train them? How do we bring them out and bring them on? And I think that we need specialty systems. We need ACOG support And I think it's a sympathetic argument. So for that reason, one of the things I think I would propose is saying, I would think more toward aligning, at least initially, with saying, become a special interest, become a society within ACOG and start working. As you get to a point where you're chafing or maybe the interests are not well aligned, there may be need to develop a separate specialty society. And I'll give you the model of maternal fetal medicine. So started off as before it was really a subspecialty. Then they had Society of Perinatal Obstetricians that turned into Society of Maternal Fetal Medicine, which then developed an advocacy and a politicking role that was separate because there needed to be some separate interests, but that it didn't start off that way. And I don't think you necessarily have to start off that way. I think working within and then saying at some point it may be totally legitimate. And when you're bringing up issues like benefits and stuff, well, that's getting to a different sort of mission, and that's that may be something that has to happen down the road. But I'd start off with sort of thinking about under the umbrella of ACOG and working responsibly within the specialty to say, how do we encourage formation of more hospitalists? How do we think about programs and working with residencies? And I would advocate that we move in that direction.
It's kind of like what I was going to say. It seems like a common thread is here that everybody's having, all of us are having this problem, is worrying about credentialing, worrying about hospital privileges, worrying about the future of my ABOG standard staff. So I think that if we as a group can sometime fairly soon come together with a statement that recommends certainly to hospitals, at which point, 1 year of being OB hospitalist, you do X amount of proctoring, 2 years as OB hospitalist, 3 years, 5 years as OB hospitalist, you would do X amount of proctoring before you get back into the mainstream, and take this forward to, so that in the future with ABOG and ACOG, that we can, again, take some leadership, because others will if we don't.
That's right, and so if we police ourselves, if we come up, if we define ourselves and then put that out, this is what we think is best practices.
Same thing with sleep 24/12. We talked about that a little bit. I think when we talked about it was we do the same thing. We have a busy hospital, we go to 12-hour calls. If we have a not so busy, we'll go 24. But we need to define it. I mean, it's fairly easy to do. We can all sit down and say, okay, if you do more than this amount, you need to go to 12. You need to back down. And I think if we define these things, and people will come in and try to police us.
Yeah.
And it's something fairly easy to do that gets a lot of criticism.
Yeah.
So.
One question I want to ask all the hospitalists: has anybody been sued yet? Once again, I think that's a very good thing, but sooner or later, one of us will be, and this is where we're going to have to, support each other, and there's not a lot of people who are experts like we are at our exact position. So it's going to be interesting to see. Certainly what we're doing is safer, but being an obstetrician, we're going to have bad results sooner